I'm getting ready to watch a video.
Ooh, what?
Oh, just some scary movie.
Do you think Jacques Derrida books are scary?
Uh-huh.
What's your favorite Derrida book?
I don't know.
Of Grammatology, Spectres of Marx, The Gift of Death?
Halloween.
Halloween?
You know, the one with the guy in the white mask who walks around and stalks babysitters?
That's not a Derrida.
What's yours?
The Animal That Therefore I Am.
Nightmare on Elm Street.
No. I said The Animal That Therefore I Am. Do you even know who Jacques Derrida is? Oh, geez, you know what? I gotta go. There's someone at my door. Somebody wearing a ghost face mask. I'll call you back. Wes Craven's 1996 film Scream is often cited as a postmodern spin on the slasher film. But is that true? What if Scream was actually more than postmodern? What if it was post-postmodern, or meta-modern, or post-meta-postmodern? Or, as Valerie Wee argues, perhaps it's hyper-postmodern. Let's take a look at what that might mean. If we want to know what's hyper about hyper-postmodernism, then we should probably define postmodernism. And if we want to know what's post about postmodernism, we should probably define modernism. Unfortunately, this is a short video, and those terms are damn near impossible to define precisely, so here's a very, very imprecise stab at some definitions. Modernism can be thought of in several ways. It's often associated with either a philosophical movement or an artistic/literary movement. In the broadest of senses, modernism wanted to progress. From a philosophical perspective, it was interested in moral progress. These views were born of the Enlightenment and were tied to the idea that human civilization could, through various means such as scientific innovation and technology, progress towards an ideal. Marxism is an example of a modernist philosophy, in the sense that society could and should progress from capitalism to communism to a socialist utopia. Marxism was also influenced by Hegelian philosophy, which adopted the view that history was a dialectic dance moving toward a state of absolute perfection. In the realm of art, modernists felt that their work could more objectively and accurately reflect the realities and hopes of a post-industrial world. Cubism and Impressionism are examples of this. These art movements wanted to move beyond traditional historical painting and instead capture the feel of real reality as it really is. It was all about progressing, making things better. Similarly, modernist architecture was committed to the idea that the decor could improve and function in an objectively better way. Postmodernism can loosely be thought of as a reaction to these artistic and philosophical movements. There are not, however, many, if any, unifying doctrines of postmodernism. It can perhaps better be thought of as a collection of ideas characterizing a time period, particularly the time period of the 1980s and onward. Perhaps the closest thing there is to a general feature of postmodernism is summed up by one of the first thinkers to be associated with the movement, Jean-Francois Lyotard. He said that the character of postmodernism was that of suspicion of meta-narratives, such as the modernist idea of progress, or the idea generally that society will or even can move toward an ideal state. In addition to Lyotard, postmodernism is often associated with thinkers such as Jacques Derrida, Michel Foucault, Richard Rorty, Judith Butler, Slavoj Žižek, and many others. So, what the heck do any of these attractive folks and heady ideas have to do with some 90s teen slasher flick? For that, let's turn back to Valerie Wee. According to Wee, Scream, and more accurately the Scream franchise, marked a cultural shift from postmodernism to hyperpostmodernism. In her essay, The Scream Trilogy, Hyperpostmodernism in the Late 90s Teen Slasher Film, Wee argued that while postmodernist tendencies could be seen in a wide variety of horror movies before the mid-90s, it was with the release of Scream that we were introduced to a dramatically heightened postmodernist sensibility at the cinema. Plenty of films included postmodern characteristics, including a tendency to blend humor and horror, to include irony, self-aware winks at the audience, open-ended narratives, unappealing characters, blurring the line between so-called high art and low art, or just a general willingness to transgress classical horror conventions. But if that's all it takes for a film to loosely fall into the category of postmodern, then what are we to make of a film like Scream that cranks those features up to 11?
Why don't you just make 10 louder and make 10 be the top number and make that a little louder?
These go to 11.
Wee argues that there are two main factors that move Scream from the postmodern to the hyper-postmodern. The first thing is that Scream demonstrates what Wee describes as a heightened degree of intertextual referencing and self-reflexivity that ceases to function at the traditional level of tongue-in-cheek subtext and emerges instead as the actual text of the film. In other words, Scream is brimming with references to other films, especially other horror films, and presumes a high degree of cultural knowledge on the part of the viewer. The movie is doing this to such an extent that it's not merely a throwaway reference here or there, but an integral element of the entire film. Scream is a movie about horror movies.
You're starting to sound like some Wes Carpenter flickers.
Barely a minute goes by without a visual or spoken reference to other films. Take a look at some of the other horror movies that are mentioned or homaged. There are so many. These are the intertextual references Wee is talking about. And there's plenty of self-reflexivity and meta-humor as well. To take one of my favorite examples, you have the scene where Randy, the most explicit and regular source of self-awareness throughout the film, is watching John Carpenter's classic Halloween while yelling at the TV screen for Laurie Strode to look behind her. Randy needs to take his own advice here, as Ghostface is mere seconds away from slicing and dicing.
Jimmy, look behind you. Look behind you. Turn around. Behind you. Oh, turn. Behind you. Behind you. Jimmy, turn around. Oh, God.
Notice that the character of Randy is telling Jamie to look behind her, using the name of the actress Jamie Lee Curtis. Randy is played by Jamie Kennedy, who is telling Jamie to turn around. So meta. Again, the point Wee is making is that this intertextuality and self-awareness are fundamental to the experience and intentions of the movie. The meta-humor, the references, the intertextuality, none of this functions as occasional passing gags or illusions. It is the movie. Wee also argues that there is a second element that makes Scream hyper-postmodern: the ways in which the film crosses media-specific boundaries to include references well beyond the realm of film. Wee calls this the cross-media marketing matrix. Basically, this is the overlap, referencing, and influencing going on between the movie and other forms of media such as television and music videos. Hyperpostmodernism is not characterized merely by a film's self-awareness and intertextuality. It is also marked by the bleeding together of other forms of media. Wee talks about how Scream influenced the production of various television shows such as Dawson's Creek and Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and how it has shown up in music videos that were tied to the marketing of the film. All of this, multiplying the meaning of the text and blurring distinctions between film and culture. The reasons for these developments are many. Wee pinpoints the rise in easy access to media. There was a time, after all, when the only opportunity to see a film was when it was playing in your local theater. Then came television, and eventually VHS and movie rental stores.
Imagine the perfect video store. It would have a great selection, right? Right! Over 10,000 videos. 3 evening rentals, so no rush, no hassle. Fast checkout. 24-hour quick drop return. Open late every night. Well, the perfect video store
Welcome to Blockbuster Video.
is popping up all over the country. There's one near you.
This made for a much more culturally literate and pop culture saturated audience. An audience that possessed what Wee calls a media-oriented hyper-consciousness, which film studios and creators had to respond to. There are, of course, many other factors that have driven the rise of this type of hyper-postmodern media. Technology is a conspicuous example. Valerie Wee coined the term hyper-postmodernism nearly 2 decades ago. What are we to make of today's media-saturated world? A world so immersed in images that it makes the late 90s look quaint in comparison. The self-awareness and intertextuality on display in Scream appear subtle next to the likes of today's memified media. It is clunky and awkward to continue to add superlatives to an overtaxed word like hyperpostmodernism. But if 1996 marked a shift in that direction, then it would certainly seem that today we are living in a hyper-postmodern age, at least. This is, of course, a double-edged sword. It might be easy to wax apocalyptic on the dangers of technology and the deterioration of society, but that's not necessarily the case here. We recognized this in regard to the rise of hyper-postmodernism when she wrote that while Scream encourages its target audiences to an ever greater consumption of media texts, it also actively subverts and revises the often problematic gender conventions associated with its genre. The film comments on and critiques those conventions, and within a tradition that has often treated power and gender roles ambiguously, the films offer representations of empowered females.
Not in my movie.
The moves toward heightened irony and self-consciousness, the reliance on homage, pastiche, and intertextuality, these postmodern moves can also be used to political effect, taking advantage of the fact that audiences today are more media savvy, more media literate, and more capable of social change than any generation that has come before them. So, where do we go from here?
I just called you. I sounded crazy.